Right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This is
Good
Diverse
morning.
Talents webinar for titled Can You See Me Now? We have a wonderful group of panelists this morning to talk about their hiring experience, their job search experience, and really just provide some insight if you're looking to hire, how a third party can help you hire and can help you also get a foot in the door of your ideal position. So to start off, we will start with some brief introductions before we get into some questions. Very quickly, I am Greer Campbell. I am a senior account manager with Diverse Talent. Diverse Talent is an executive search and placement firm that works to support the notion that a pipeline exists in all industries. And we will get a little bit more into that as we go on. But to introduce our panelists, Manat, if you would like to begin and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Manat Singh. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Executive Director for the Colorado Consumer Health Initiative.
Thank you, Manat. Susumu?
Hello, I'm Susumu Blackwolf. I'm a senior INC EE engineer.
Awesome. Thank you. Kale?
Hi, I'm Kale McMonigal. I'm a collaboration director with the Civic Canopy, a nonprofit in Colorado.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Mr. Evans.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Malcolm Evans. I am board chair of the and also managing for Wintrust Bank's commercial banking team here in Denver.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again for taking the time this morning to talk a little bit about your experiences. We have a few topics to discuss, and then we will open it up to you all in the audience to ask any additional questions that you'd like to hear from the panelists. So we will jump right into it. To get started, actually, Mr. Evans, I had the first question for you. From your experience in being a business leader, really being instrumental in hiring processes, throughout the years, what have you noticed to be one of the biggest challenges or something that you've seen come up when your organization or your team is looking to hire diversity or diverse talent?
Sure, happy to address that question. Thank you for it. Diverse talent, I think, especially in the banking industry, is challenging. So you really have to, be attentive, right? And you're not going to maybe get resumes by just posting the job on LinkedIn or on some other job website. You have to, I think an executive search firm that has a database of pool of diverse candidates is a very valuable resource to use. But in addition, I think it's really it has been helpful for me to reach out to colleges and universities and kind of start that process early, right? And so whether we bring in an intern, I go out to the campuses and visit, those kids that are majoring in accounting or finance or banking and start that dialogue, maybe 2 years before they're ready to enter a career. So it is challenging to find industry. And again, you have to be, more targeted and direct than just, posting a job out there on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny to see throughout the years, especially within the past, 3 to 5 years with the Great Resignation and all the shifts of the job market on how you really have to shift and adjust your own organization or your own people's intent to hire and really adjust your strategies in finding that talent, the right talent that will produce that longevity. So thank you, Mr. Evans. Kale, did you have anything to add around searching or looking to hire diversity and what you've really seen?
Yeah, so the way that our work works is that we support collaboration throughout the state. And so oftentimes we're looking for folks who have different facilitation skills. We have a little bit of a different problem in the sense that, if I say the word banking or I say the word engineering, people generally know what I mean. Sometimes facilitation can mean a lot of different things, and there's different types of facilitators, and there's not always the direct pathways to, okay, I went to school for this, then I became this, then I'm here doing this type of work. So oftentimes when we're recruiting for folks, we are looking to many different industries. We might source from social work or public health. We might source from communication studies. And it takes a little bit more work for not only us to find the right folks, but for them to find us. And so we are, in some ways, we get a lot of applicants from within our existing networks, but it's been a challenge to get beyond those in some ways and be able to quickly explain, actually, I think your relevant experience would fit for this position, even though it may not be the keywords you're searching for when you're looking for a position.
Yes, absolutely. Those keywords and the little buzzwords are so important analytically, but also just for your audience and who you're really looking to engage. Mr. Evans, it looks like we have a question from the audience. How would you suggest for an incoming accounting or finance diverse candidate for them to get their foot in the door?
Oh, great question. Banking, right? I've been in banking now 30 plus years. 20 like being in the legal profession where you can become an associate in accounting or law firm and move up to partner and so forth. This is nicely staged. So I see to get to the best entry point is coming in as a credit analyst, right? Right out of college, if you fields and come in as a credit analyst. What does the credit analyst do? Basically, a credit analyst is kind of that entry point into commercial banking where you're basically taking financial statements from businesses. You're analyzing those statements by putting them into the banks, lining the years side by side to take a look at how the company has performed year over year. That's kind of the first, then you move on to maybe write-ups, right, for loan officers and junior loan officers. So that's a great entry point. And I recommend, looking at starting as an intern in one of those, commercial banking groups or commercial real estate groups, right? But I say, there's the commercial banking, then that's what we call the retail banking. Retail banking is what we're most familiar with, right? Well, you're like, hey, bank, I'm going to go fill out an application, right? So those retail positions are typically from teller to branch manager. And so you're basically dealing with the consumer, person that walks in or wants to open an account, person that walks in and wants to get a home loan, versus dealing with the commercial businesses, so the large business that need a $10 million loan, right? So if you just want to go into the retail space, customer facing, you can start out as a teller while you're still in college, right? That's where I started my career retail to commercial years of my career as a teller. So that's easiest way I could get in, 30 years ago. But hopefully that addressed your question. Happy for, follow up to that if that wasn't quite, quite clear.
No, I think it is so important. Something that we have been doing on our HBCU tours. Diverse Talent does annual HBCU tours, and we go and really provide these students with the tools and the resources to be able to accurately leverage their backgrounds and their skill sets while they're still in college and getting that head start, really to just feel out their career, what they really like about it, and how they can grow within that career. I think college is a great start to get your foot in that door. So I really appreciate that response, Mr. Evans.
Certainly.
Moving on to my next question I have for Susumu. Just based on your experience throughout your entire career, what are some of the challenges that you have faced when applying to jobs online? And really, what has that looked like, and how has that changed throughout the years?
Well, to be honest, the dynamics of just getting out there and getting noticed. I mean, you're pretty much in an ocean of just a school of fish that just will massively put out resumes. And to get noticed, using buzzwords or just, to get to show that you have the experience to be in that position is probably the hardest diversity to get there and get noticed. It's changed to the times of just walking up and giving a resume to where now it's just an email. It's very easy to delete. It's very easy to scan to where no one's noticing it. They will put a search engine out there, and if you don't have these keywords, that's it. You're just deleted. You're just a pile of emails at this point in time. It's evolving to where people are now dynamically changing the resume to get caught in the search net anymore, and then trying to keep up with the interviews at that point in time. Everything's online now. No one's meeting you. You're just either a push button screen away or a simple review.
Absolutely, absolutely. The mass applications, and it sometimes feels like, just speaking from my experience, it sometimes feels like you're submitting your application into just a giant pool that you're not even sure is going to be reviewed. Manat, I'd love to hear from you about really your experience and also what you have done in the past to try and break through that pool of the masses of applications and how that's worked for you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. I have also felt that struggle of how do you convey that you feel you're the right fit for a job. And for me in particular, I've had a pretty non-traditional career past in history. And so I didn't have the titles that would suggest that I had the experience, even though I had the skills, I had the projects, I had the management experience, but my titles didn't look right for a typical career path in the direction I was heading, especially for an executive leadership role. And so I historically did something that Kayla had mentioned about like kind of using your network. And so rather than the mass send of emails and resumes and job applications, I was pretty strategic. But even then it was a challenge unless somebody already knew me, unless I'd had a contract with them or had collaborated with them on something. People who didn't know me and my experience would have no reason to necessarily believe that I was the right fit given my title and the types of places I worked. And so really doing a lot of informational interviews and showing up to every networking thing and speaking at conferences. And it was more about strengthening my network. I didn't really trust the job application process to find me my next best fit. It was always through word of mouth or the creation of a job, like a typical millennial. I had a number of my jobs in the past were invented upon my kind of suggestion and co-creation of a job and a role. And so there's a lot of that. I don't believe I've ever actually applied for a job in the traditional way and gotten one. I don't think that has ever happened in my career, in the kind of submit an application, hope somebody notices, go through the process. It's never really gone that way. And especially in the field that I'm in, which CCHI is a health advocacy and policy, that also doesn't always have like common credentials or easy credentials to figure out what the right fit is.
Right.
We pull from a lot of different backgrounds and different experience and different expertise, and none of us have the same credentials to get, to where we are right at that organization.
Right. I think that the networking piece is so important. It's really about that advocacy when you're networking and you build those relationships in your industry or in your community. That person knows people and that person knows people, and everyone has their own network that they can advocate for you. And while it's unconventional and sometimes unfortunate that you can't just click the apply and be accurately considered, I think that's also something that Diverse Talent does for our candidates, is that we advocate and vouch for our candidates while also keeping in mind, what this client needs. And the perfect candidate really doesn't exist. It's all about the perspective that these applicants can bring, and however your network, your audience, or Diverse Talent can bring that to light and really accurately describe how this applicant can use their previous skill sets to better your company or better your position. It's all about the advocacy. So the networking is so important. That's something that we really push on everyone that we meet, because a sense of community and a sense of building relationships is so important. Before I move on to the next question, any of the panelists have anything else to add about really sticking out in that application process or networking, building relationships? Right, awesome. We will move right along. So the next question, I'll start with you, Kale, is really, what would you consider, and of course, this is probably different for each position, for each company, but what would you consider some of the most important pieces of a hiring process to be, and why?
Yeah, so one of them that was unique to us and was really helpful in Diverse Talents process was the ability to provide an introduction to potential applicants to get to know us as an organization before coming in to work with us. This was particularly useful for us because we're a little bit unique. We're going through a transition as an organization to disrupt our hierarchy and share power within our organization, so that we don't necessarily have strong sort of a ladder within the organization, but we value each person's kind of ability to come in and make decisions. And so for that reason, that's very different from a lot of organizations. So I think a big step in this and getting folks who I think would really stick through this transition with us was being able to do a firm introduction at the very beginning, which we were able to do through a quick video introduction. Similarly, all the candidates were able to do that in return with us so that we could just get to know them a little bit before actually going into the formal interview process. I think other things that are really important is having a couple of different touch points so that you can understand not just, does this person have the skills, experience, some of those things that we tend to look as formal indicators of whether or not somebody's ready for a position, title, education, but then also what are some of those things that we can get to know about a person when we see them work in practice, or when we see how they work with a team as well. Those are some of the things that I think are valuable to us in a hiring process.
Yes, absolutely. I think that sense of communication on both sides, just like you said, companies communicating, who are you? Who would this person really be working for? Not only, the specific responsibilities of the position, but your culture, what's going on internally right now, so that there are no surprises. I mean, that sense of transparency has really shown to be very important to the candidates. It's not a turn off, or it's not an anxious thing that they hear, but it's something that they can cater their mindset to, and really, while they're communicating to how they can be a help to your organization, they can really specifically talk about how they would fit. So that video of the information on both sides, the company information and the candidate information, I think is a really important piece. Mr. Evans, do you have anything else to add about, important pieces of hiring process and what that looks like for you?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think um, really important pieces to me, soft skills, right? Um, you know, how that individual, maybe perceives in a, face-to-face meeting, how, and even when you interview that individual, either on a virtual call or an in-person call, people can be a little nervous, right? And so, maybe those interpersonal skills doesn't come out. So, it's important to kind of, maybe flush those soft skills out, I think, in kind of a less formal, out, recruiting potential, new bankers to work for me at Wintrust. I'll just go out and not have that formal interview. Let's just go out. Not be looking for a particular job at that point. Maybe I'm recruiting them, they don't know it, right? And so you can maybe sense those soft skills through that, and other things that come up that I think you don't know until you made that hire, if it's the right hire and right fit for that individual, for the company, is making sure that you, as an employer, that you set the expectations out very clearly during the interview process, kind of at the 10,000-foot level, right? Here's what you're expected to do, in this role, right? And then when that individual, they accept the job, having a real clear, plan for that individual in the first 12 months to 18 months, to make sure that they don't get disillusioned, frustrated, and then you as an employer, you don't get frustrated. I've executive directors for the Colorado Black Chamber. I hired employees for Wintrust Bank. And so, in both of those, position, I wonder what their expectations, were in those roles, and measure for me, to those roles, versus just coming in, hey, you figure it out, here's the job, here's the desk, here's the phone, and you don't see your manager for another, month, critical as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate both of your
I think
perspectives.
that's critical as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I was cutting out there. Did I cut you off, Mr. Evans?
No, you're fine.
Okay, great.
I'll post that.
Awesome. All right. So we will move to the last question I have, and then I do see that there are some questions that are coming in from the audience, and so we will then address those. So diverse talent, really what we were born from is this notion that we kept hearing. a pipeline doesn't exist in an executive industries. A pipeline doesn't exist in the legal industry. And our CEO, Michelle Campbell, comes from extensive background of engineering, legal, nonprofit experience. And she, just as Manat said, has networked and built relationships with diverse backgrounds within each industry. So this is a misconception that she knew was not true. And diverse talent was created to really share our pipeline that we knew existed with our community and with national organizations that really are looking to hire and create that sense of inclusion. My question, and Manat, we will start with you, is how has this misconception about the pipeline or lack thereof shown up for you throughout your professional career?
So earlier in my career, I believed in the myth of that missing pipeline, which is what spurred me to also kind of find my own paths and find my own jobs and find my own partners in the work that I did. And as I got more increasing responsibilities, bigger projects, more collaboration, farther scope in the type of work that I do, I found that there were ways to kind of work yourself in a pipeline if you were networking with people that were having conversations at the similar level that you were, or who had the same passions that you did. There was always a way to find, maybe not a pipeline, but at least like a path you could build together and follow it together. And in the health advocacy and nonprofit advocacy and policy world, at least here in Colorado, it feels a little bit like we've all been playing musical chairs amongst ourselves, especially in like the leadership roles. We all have seen each other in different places and in different projects. And so even in coming into this new role last year, I was reintroduced and almost like a reunion of every person I've come across since I moved to Colorado for graduate school. And that told me that there was a pipeline. It just wasn't as linear as I maybe thought it was when I was younger and earlier in my career. And I think one of the things that happened when diverse talent reached out to me about this role that I have now was I had made some assumptions about whether or not that was something that the folks who were hiring for this job would consider me for, because of my non-traditional career path, because I didn't see myself within that pipeline of folks that would be funneled into a job like that. I had kind of led myself to believe that it didn't really, I was like, I don't know that I'm the right fit for them. And then diverse talent informed me that they know better, or maybe had some other nuance of understanding, or had spoken with the team about who they were looking for and how pipeline comes into the picture or doesn't. And really it was a pipeline of talent, not of job titles and credentials in the formalized sense of the word. And so a couple of different times in my career on my own, I figured out a pipeline isn't what I think it is. But for this particular recent evolution of my career, I was educated on how that executive search happens in a different way. And it's more of a true talent search and a profile of a person search and a assumption of, or not assumption, a proof of skill sets and personality traits and connections and abilities, rather than do you have the right job? Do you have the right titles that suggest you could do this job? And so the pipeline it just looks different. There is one, it just looks different than what I assumed it did.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that a third party can bring to both the company and the applicant, is we have that outside perspective. You know, we've heard from you and your organization on exactly what you're looking for, and we kind of connect the dots internally of people in our pipeline. And on paper with the titles, it may not match up exactly, but from what we've heard and really from what we've analyzed that an organization needs, and vice versa, it's a perspective that we can bring from the outside. So I really appreciate that answer, Manat. Susumu, I wanted to ask you the same question of how this misconception about the pipeline has shown up for you as well.
Well, one, it didn't exist. just period. As an electrical engineer, you just throw that out there and you're in the masses. You know, you try the network, you meet other engineers, you shake hands, you do the schmoozing, you answer the questions correctly, but it's still not enough. It didn't really exist. You know, Diverse Town was one of those ones that I wouldn't even call it a pipeline. We're talking like express highway here. Got me to the positions, got me to the people that needed to wear this current position that I got. Was like, wow, like I didn't know I'd actually be able to get this position, because prior to this, I applied for over 300 jobs and trying to customize the resume to hit what they were actually looking for was still not enough. You know, this pipeline was more than shaking hands. It was coming into the interview. They knew exactly what I can do. I knew exactly what I can offer. It was a handshake and a position of, I have yet to work. I am feeling a position of, you know, I work literally with friends, and this is just a cog in the machine of a company. You know, they have all my talents. You know, I was able to grab everything, pick it up, run with it, and it's just been a huge, like, eye-opening of, you know, things can exist. This, you know, this pipeline or expressway, you know, does exist, of not even having to, you know, use a blanket resume or try to personalize a resume. It's just this, here's what we're looking for, here's what you have, here's what we have to offer. Let's get together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it really is about community and having people surround you that are in your corner and are vouching for what they know you can bring to the table, which I think was such an amazing piece, especially with engineering, because it's so factual based and it's such quantitative measures that a lot of times you do enter into an interview and say, you know, well, they know everything about me. And so it's really about making sure that we leverage and highlight every piece of your background and stuff, and bring up facts that they might not see, but that can really help them, that you bring. And so that's a really important piece, again, to have that outside perspective. Well, we have some questions from the audience. So I am going to read some of them off. I know that we addressed one of them actually, but there is one that says, you know, what are some networking strategies you would recommend to individuals starting out in the workforce? And I think that this was a question that I would have loved answered when I was first entering into the workforce. Networking is incredibly intimidating, especially for people that are young in their profession. It is intimidating, you know, making those connections, saying the right thing, really getting a groove going with conversation. So I would love to hear from anyone about really some of the strategies that you used early in your career and how they have worked out for you in building relationships while networking. Whoever wants to join in. Yeah, of course.
I can go. I will say, and I think it is a little field dependent, but in my area of work, which I started pretty young in legislative and policy analysis, even as early as undergrad, I decided to swallow my fear and ask everybody whose job I wanted in the future if I could have an informational interview with them. And back then I felt like I was bothering people, taking up their time. But now that I'm 15 years into my career, I get so excited to talk to people who are starting out and who have ideas and questions and uncertainties. And so the thing that I would hold in your mind as you're figuring out if you know, what networking looks like is there are a lot of people who are further along in their careers who are excited to share their wisdom and want to help and love bringing new young talent up into whatever the pipeline is, or the expressway, or the massive ocean of applicants that are hoping to have a career in whatever field that you're chatting with them in. So that would be the first thing I would say is a thing to remember is there are a lot of people who love speaking to people who are starting out. I am one of them. I will take any opportunity to speak to a learner, a student. We have fellows and interns, and I love talking to them about their career goals and trying to figure out where, you know, different directions that their noses can point in. So I would first do the informational interviews and then just ask, can I come with you? You know, do you have an event? Can I come with you? Can I just listen? Is there a way to get a student registration? Or if I write a blog or something about it, can I come to this event? I can do X, Y, and Z, kind of like I'd like to do, you know, something that lets you participate in what's happening as well. The first major conference I attended when I moved to Colorado, I just graduated from grad school, was Health Foundation's annual event. And I offered to write a blog about my experience, to, you know, attend one of the sessions and kind of be part of the workshop. And I got to meet every single person in health nonprofit advocacy that summer after I graduated from grad school. And a month later, I had a job offer because of that conference. And so just kind of finding places where the worst thing that you can hear is no, we don't have room, or no, we don't have time. But I would ask. And I also specifically, when I was younger, looked for female, women of color leaders in industries that I wanted to work in. And I said, I would like to sit with you and figure out how you did this, because I want to be you in 10 years. Those women who I all met with back, you know, 13, 14 years ago now are all my colleagues now, which is also a little wild. But finding people who you can imagine maybe having that job, or, you know, wanting to kind of point in that direction. And then remembering that a lot of people like to help build new talent as well.
Absolutely. That is interesting approach. I think that you really do have to get methodical and really strategize on networking and getting into building relationships with those people that you want their job in 10 years. I love that. I love that approach. Malcolm, did you have any other ideas around getting your foot in networking and really breaking through and building those relationships?
Yeah, certainly. I think that very important that you are involved in the community, and that you certainly, you know, have connections, right? That you know, will eventually lead to, you know, to prospects and customers ultimately. So you know, I think it moved in 2002, 20 and a half years ago now, and so I, you know, I traveled to Denver, but so as a commercial banker, I had to, you know, get involved in the community pretty quickly. So what I did was, you know, I looked initially at the organizations that you know my employer were already members of or part of, uh, you know, those or was find those interesting, and kind of like, okay, I'll be the representative for, you know, for the bank at the, you know, particular chicken dinner or whatever, right? Uh, Chamber was one of the organizations that my employer was a member of, and being one of, you know, the few African American time, I raised my hand and, you know, got involved in the chamber, and that ultimately led to, you know, board position 15 years later. Other organizations was like, okay, well, what else are you passionate about, right? So I got involved in Big Sisters, a couple of organizations, and what do you do when you get into those organizations? Well, you try and differentiate yourself, right? You try to say, okay, you know, have, you know, similar skill sets as me. And, again, you're going to go down to maybe, 5 people that you want to go out and have coffee with, that you want to, have lunch with, and you ultimately become friends with those individuals potentially, right? And so that becomes, a way to broaden your net. So I think, I'm not an extreme extrovert, I'm not an introvert. I'm kind of somewhere between, right? And so going to those, finding people that you can as George Bush would be comfortable talking to, and some people that maybe you're not as comfortable talking to, but you can still understand where their space is and respect that. So yeah, I think that's key. Just get out there, find out what organizations your employers kind of go from there.
Absolutely. Getting out of your comfort zone. I know that even extroverted people, going into an entire room full of professionals that, they look up to or that they strive to be like, it's uncomfortable, and really just getting out of your comfort zone will lead to more opportunities, more connections, and just a better understanding of what you're looking for professionally. Looks like we have time for one more question. So that is, are there any tips on how to get your resume seen and considered? I'll open it up to anyone that has any perspective on that.
Give it to diverse talent.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest, engaging, just like Manat, you said, making those connections, sending your resume to them. Diverse talent, definitely that third party is important.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because you can take a job description from an employer and you can cater your resume to that. But send it to them, you're in the masses again. It's a search net. They're looking for keywords that probably aren't even in the job description. Try to highlight the talents. If you're an engineer, try to bring up designs that you did. If you're, a electrical engineer, try to break that down. Just don't use electrical engineer. Use, what you actually built. If you're, in comms, if you're embedded programming, show that you're an engineer. Just don't write it down. Put that description in your talents, in your background. Previous job experience. Just don't write down which previous you did as a blanket statement. Highlight exactly and show. It should read as a story of what you've actually done.
Absolutely. Those real-time examples are so important. Back to that quantitative data that you can give, especially with engineering. They're not really looking for, how much you've enjoyed it. While that is so important, they're really looking, especially on the resume, for how you can do the job and what experiences that you've seen as well. Final question that we have just came through. Kale, I'd love to get your perspective on this. Any recommendations for prepping for interviews?
Yeah, so I think when we're looking at candidates, the thing that we're looking for most is folks to tell specific examples or stories that illustrate the skill that they're talking about. So while you may not be able to anticipate every question that you'll have in an interview, if you go through questions in advance of typical questions that you'd have in an interview and think about what are my go-to professional stories or experience stories that highlight the skills that I bring to the position, times where I've navigated conflict in a position, those types of things. So I'm ready to pull out those stories when the question gets asked, and actually just writing those stories out so that they're at the tip of your tongue and thinking about them from the perspective of an employer. Sometimes I'll notice when candidates in an interview get kind of stuck in a lot of context for a story or want to explain all of the details, or some of the things that feel a little bit like um, uh, personal or like hard in a conflict situation. Think about what you're trying to communicate to that employer of how you handled that situation, and have kind of a clear narrative arc to it of how you would move through something like that.
Absolutely. Being sure of yourself and definitely showing up authentically is something that we encourage our candidates to do, and also encourage our clients to listen for. The art of interviewing is so important because you do get that face-to-face or screen to screen, whatever the situation may be, but it's also an opportunity for candidates or applicants to authentically show what they bring to the table, their mission, their drive to enter into this position, because, especially in the past 5 years, it's been proven that applicants are really looking for innovative and impactful positions. And so giving them that opportunity to show up authentically and really describe what impact they're trying to make with this position, because essentially that will impact your organization as well. So preparing for interviews, even getting a friend or a colleague to do a mock interview with you, that's something that we really push for our candidates to do. Prepare for that. I mean, just as you said, Kale, you can't prepare or expect any specific questions for each interview unless they send you the questions, which some employers do, and that's great. But it's really about just being sure of yourself, knowing your background, knowing the position that you're going for and the company, and really articulating how you can be an addition to that team, because we know you are, and that's why Diverse Talent likes to leverage backgrounds, because we see from that outside perspective of how you can make an impact, and we want to make sure that all parties are aware. Does any of the panelists have any other thoughts before we close it out?
One recommendation I would have is bring a portfolio. You're walking into a position that, example, you talk to somebody that says they're an artist. Question is, what have you drawn on the show? Do the same thing for going into a position. They've already read your resume. They're already in it. Now take it to the next step. Prepare a portfolio. If you're an artist, show your art. If you're an engineer, show your designs. You're an architect, show what you've done. Bring your resume and yourself to life. Prepare to show that here's what I've done. This is me. A portfolio during an interview is a great thing just to hand to somebody to show and enforce the experiences and the talents that you really have.
Absolutely, absolutely. That over communication, that over preparedness is better than the alternative, especially today. Virtual pieces, we've kind of lost that personal touch to an extent. And so providing all of that information that you can, the examples, the past experiences, really shows up for employers. Awesome. Well, I really, really, really want to start off by thanking our participants for their questions, their attention. I know that this session has been very insightful for me, and so I hope that it also brought insight to you all. And then finally, most importantly, I would love to thank our panelists. They're busy, busy people. And so for them to carve out some time of their day to really talk about their experiences and how it's really led them to where they are today, we really appreciate your insight and advice. Again, we are Diverse Talent, an executive search and placement firm. This is live on Facebook. This recording will also be posted on our social media and our website in case you missed the beginning, middle, or end. But thank you all again so much, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Have a good day.